They tell what we say.
Yeah.
If there is a meeting, the media will come and report what is being said in the meeting went a rally. But whatever we're doing is us now to say, these are the messages which we want to be broadcast. Radio Move, can you be on air, please?
The media is a watchdog of society. The media needs even to report on their own, because there are people that we live with in society. They themselves can even pick it up and bring it to the public to say, this is what is happening. When they bring it to the fore, people will know to say, oh, this vice is bad.
As you know, the issue of child labor needs to be exposed to the larger extent so that people know about them. And it's only the media that can do that.
The media practitioners are not actually getting the right information which they're supposed to get from the public. The reason being that if you go direct to the community might not know who you are. And because of that, they might not even give you the right information you are trying to look for.
The purpose of the media guideline is to provide basic information on how to design and produce child domestic labor media products. The cornerstone of the guideline is derived from having a consultative approach with the media, the government, and civil society stakeholders.
We need to hear from them what is it they need, not what we think they need. So I think the approach of approaching social things is cardinal, because that will enable us to build a country in the rightful way. And also the other sectors, much of it which we have forgotten. And I think I want to emphasize that media is all about education. Media is all about information. But much of it we've taken a role of wanting to be agitators. That's not our role. Our role is to inform, educate. And that has to come from us sitting down, from the grassroots, coming up.
The media has a very important role to play in society in that it sets the agenda for public discussion and as well as the discourse that people take in discussing issues that affect the society. And looking at child labor particularly, one of the key issues that the media can engage itself in is bringing the child labor issue high on the media agenda, discussing it to the levels that politics is discussed, and engaging people into that debate and discussion. And ultimately what you're hoping is that the media will help shape the society's opinions on issues such as child labor, or at least draw the attention that is required to make a change in issues surrounding child labor.
Specifically, the guide is aimed at suggesting a process to media practitioners for them to be able to adopt an effective approach in the development of child domestic labor media products.
Before someone goes out in the field, you first of all have to know the type of community you are going to deal with. Explain to them what you are going to talk about and why you want to discuss the issue at hand. And the purpose, why you want to get that information and where you want to take that information. In most cases, information has not been taken on correctly. Why? Because the people you are trying to get information from have not been told of where you want to take that information.
The audience is the intended outcome of any communication. Okay, we communicate because there's need to communicate a message between one point and the other. The job of a media practitioner is to mediate. Okay, so there is an information that needs to be communicated between one point to the next. The media, what it does as a media form, is actually mediating. So what we are doing is creating an environment where we are enabling a message to be passed effectively to be reached to the audience. Now, if you do not understand your audience, if you do not know how best to communicate, if you don't even speak their language, how could you then communicate with that audience? And also to understand the environment in which they are working. If you don't know when is their resting time, when is the time when they are actually able to receive messages effectively, then whatever you do might not be as effective as you would want it to be.
Because what has happened is that they have taken much of their coverage on the political areas and things that have got the global and the interest. For example, talk about issue of HIV and AIDS, which is now at the highest agenda. So these other things, like look at mental health. If we talk about mental health, no one is involved in mental health, and there's no coverage in mental health, but the thing is happening. Talk about child labor. Initially, there was no coverage. It's just now that people are starting to come out. So when they sit, you people from the media, look at that very critically. You actually the driving force.
Well, the media has to be taken and looked at it in the most holistic context. The media is made up of news. It's also made up of advertising, and I think it's very important to look at both contexts. If you look at the message of child labor, you can have it both as news or features or documentaries, but also there's a lot of paid for programs which address the situation, or commercials or community messages. And when you look at it from that context, you have to bear in mind that the media operates within certain ethics and balances and fairness on covering some of these issues. But also all this has to be done within the media ethics, the professional ethics.
You see, so those are some of the issues, the challenges that we are facing in terms of media reporting, because issues are not coming out from the media. So if Radio Chengero is saying they have been reporting, do people really access that information, especially on issues that are specific on children matters, children rights, child labor issues? If you watched the documentary on ZMBC last Saturday, you saw the children were talking about child labor, Colgate Palmolive Shop supported program, Fun Time. But then they were talking about child abuse. You see the link there. There is a lot of problems. So we need to also equip the media by capacity building them so they understand the background of child labor. They understand what child labor is, what constitutes child labor and what constitutes child work, so that then their role can be effective.
It is important for programmers to actually have a grip of what they are disseminating to the public. I mean, how would a programmer wanted to communicate with the public when he is not versed with the subject matter that is handling? I think continuous training of programmers is quite important. I mean, especially in socially motivated or inspired subject like child labor, like HIV, like abuse, exploitation, unemployment. You need to understand the dynamics of actually what informs a perpetuation of some of those social ills. And for you to be able to deal with them, you yourself have to be quite knowledgeable. And to do so empowers you also to empower the people you disseminate information to.
This is the main approach. If you're a director, a producer, you have to understand your audience first. Who are you targeting this to? By understanding your audience, then you know what to write about them, because you don't write about what you don't know. And like the way I went to do my scouting for talent, I had to go to those particular places, in nightclubs, churches, beer halls. I was at one point sitting with the prostitutes because I wanted to study what they do. And this is how I happened to know how to put my input in this script, because now I knew what you wrote about a woman is not exactly what it is. Let's put it this way, because I'm a woman. Although these are prostitutes, but there are positive sides of them. So that way it was hands-on in getting involved with them.
But having said this, it's very important to realize that to be very confident to write or talk or produce a material for a public, people have to be very confident and skilled to be able to do this. And here I'm looking at the journalists. How much do the lobbyists and activists of children's rights or child labor, how much do they engage the media in sharing information, in bringing up their skills to par, in being able to give them the confidence to write and talk about these topics with as much information as possible? And in the same vein, to what extent do the lobbyists engage editors? These are the gatekeepers who ultimately decide what goes into the press and what stays out.
In setting the stage, you need to understand components necessary for the development of an effective child domestic labor media product. In this endeavor, you need to have insight in the environment you are operating in, which is necessary in the development of appropriate media products. Critical in this process are the following questions that you need to ask. Who are the media in your community? What is the current scenario of child labor? What are the resources available to assist you in the fight against child domestic labor?
I think there are 4 conditions that one needs to be taken into account. One, of course, I said understanding. But the second is, of course, to have empathy and empathy with the people that you're going to be working with. It is necessary for you to form a kind of a relationship that bears into account what are the basic elements that are forming the relationship between you and the people that you're going to communicate with. That is the second element. The third element, I think, is also creating an affinity with the subject itself.
First, go and do the work.
Relatives of these children's parents usually scramble for property left by the deceased on the pretext that they would also look after the orphans, but everything changes afterwards. There are also many people in urban centers, especially those in the lower income bracket, who have taken advantage of their poor relatives in rural areas, are inviting their children with promises that they would offer them a better life.
And finally, I think, is to recognize the environment, the total environment of communication. So you have to know the language in which you're going to be speaking, the kind of social bearings that are required before you can communicate. You need to actually understand, for example, who are the authoritative figures within let's say a village. If you go to a village and you don't know exactly who are the authoritative figures there who can actually help you to communicate messages across, then your messages could be, half lost. If you knew, for example, music is the best way of communicating message, and you don't use music to communicate that message, half of whatever you communicated actually fails. So some of the authoritative elements of communication within an environment are necessary for you to be able to understand, first to understand and then use them to be able to communicate within that environment.
Obviously, media communication goes with responsibility, in that for you to even begin to think of communicating any form of message through to the public, you have to believe in that.
I've made the film. I'm done with it. It's out of my hands. It belongs to you. You squeeze it, you cut it, you
I agree with you. The very sense of saying something means a need to communicate, a point of view, a perspective, even sometimes a function. And what you're trying to say here is, I don't even have a purpose. I don't need to have a purpose. I'm just going to communicate. And I think that kind of makes this forum feel uncomfortable with your position. We want to understand the perspective from which you begin to communicate with us, to communicate with those people that are willing to listen to you.
Maybe you were not listening carefully what the narrative was saying. If you did, you would realize that I wasn't talking, I wasn't telling you, I was meditating. Listen, watch the film again.
To what extent do our own beliefs, our own ideas, do they always filter through? Are we sure that they always filter through to what we finally produce?
Honesty becomes vital in the sense that you will not be able to communicate anything that you do not believe in. And sincerity, you have to be sincere as a media communicator. You have to be honest, and you have to have integrity in the sense that you're not going to pile a lot of lies or a lot of unsubstantiated information to your public. So you have a responsibility to check and balance, to verify whether what you want to communicate is in earnest, true. And I think it's all about pulling through credibility.
A journalist, any media person, does not live in isolation. And the country they live in, that's the only country they have. They have a responsibility to the country they are going to address that social issue. Negativity does not build a country. Once I destroy Zambia, I have no other Zambia to live in. And that's a factor which has to be underlined. Now, how to handle social issues is not about saying 100 persons have died, 100 persons are infected. The issue is, how does this affect the development of this country? In my reporting, when I report in this kind of way, how will it affect me in the long run? I'm not detached from what I'm reporting because it has its own repercussions tomorrow.
People tend to confuse advocacy and propaganda. You know, propaganda for me would be understood to condition, to impose certain opinions on people's minds. But for me, advocacy, it's in a manner you alter people's perceptions in a very positive way without them feeling that they're being manipulated, they're being imposed. You know, where it's more awareness creating kind of activities.
I think advocacy should be understood as a process by which change is created. The one way that you can create change is by changing some of the policies that have maybe stopped, retarded, or not made possible the changes that are required within a community. So by recognizing that some of these policies are not working, then you are creating, and you create an advocacy environment where people can now stand up, understanding that this is only for purposes of change. Advocacy can only be effective if there is a desire to change. If there's no desire for change, then no advocacy can be effective. So we need to kind of understand first the environment, that the policies that have already been made that need changing, and then create an environment of whereby an advocacy situation can be developed to make that policy change possible.
You know, sometimes I think one mistake we make, we have a lot of assumptions on political persons. We tend to assume that they are very well informed when they are not.
Because issues of child labor, we see them every day. And somehow, maybe because of lack of information, an MP is unable maybe to effect the check and see to it that issues of worst forms of child labor in their constituencies are minimized.
For a person to make good decision, they are supposed to be well informed. They're supposed to be educated. And much of it, like I said, we forget and expect them to be experts in courts. And when we see the lack of delivery to social issues, or the drive towards social issues in the way we expect as society or as individuals, what we do is pounce on them. But I think that's a very great mistake we make, because politicians or policymakers are part of us. They are our relatives, they are our uncles, they are our brothers. We've been to the same schools. So the factor is how we can enable ourselves, because I believe policy is not for them. Policy is made for the good of all of us.
If it went on a national scale, we would discover more issues than what that video has uncovered. On the cover belt, young girls were made to make love with dogs. And these pictures, porno pictures, were going outside this country. And those girls were also being trafficked out of the country.
My view is that you must use the people so that these issues come to the fore. And these various bodies and committees within your constituency can easily articulate amongst themselves. And your role would be to come and link. For example, I have learned here that there are many bodies that I can go to during my spare time or mornings of my parliament. Today we're going to parliament. In the mornings, other than sitting here, I can go to YWCA. I now know what they can provide. I can pick some literature. I can go to many other organizations, and this literature, our jobs as MPs are to pick the literature, entice these organizations, even to the extent of inviting them to our constituencies with their resources plus our little resources to be able to come and pick specific subjects and advance the call. So it is possible.
This Media Toolkit is a set of steps that will give media practitioners and selected gatekeepers an opportunity to enhance their ability to produce media products on child domestic labor issues.
It is time for us, in order to enhance quality, we have to have these in place so that our programs on television, our programs on radio will be of good quality.
I would say first to understand that a documentary is a mode of communication that enhances the way we communicate with the audiences, with our audiences, for the purpose of change. That is why we use documentaries. But we should not make documentaries only informational. No, documentaries should be creative, should be entertaining, should be interesting, should be enabling environments for communication, for discussing, for questioning. Now that is what a documentary and what any media programmer should be working towards.
Ask my question, what is it that we're not doing right in our sensitization, in our awareness raising? What is it that we're not doing? Because the levels of ignorance in certain issues is quite very, very high. But here we are spending a lot of money in awareness raising.
Today what we are saying, when we float something on the TV, we know that everybody has heard. It's not true. We need, if we have to campaign, we need to use other orthodox methods so that the message reaches the internet people.
Films tabwera kutambisane film ya child abuse na child labor.
Lutahe utwaka makande ya child abuse ni child labor. Katubola tonse tuswangane kumbita market. Mubwele kumbita market tikambisane pankani ya child abuse na nkani ya child labor na human trafficking. Bwelani bantu bose bakuno kumalota takwita nani pambita market na ntao ya 1730 tikambisane pankani ya child abuse na child labor.
Okay, monga wise kwa tukala kuno ku Livingstone mmalota mwatu muno tubaona feba chiti upeza mwana mungono maningi kamwana kwa mkazi kanyamula ma 20 liters abiri, which is not good. Muona tibaona nima mbiri maningi upeza mabaa batu mabana bangono mabaa bakande kugula moba chibuku. That's not good.
Bakanyengera mfana atetka gulema sweet wakapeka msanga wende kakashita vapuba.
Naona pondano mene banachita kuva uko.
Kaliko soka mfana kambili chabi. Kuja.
This is the most highly dense population in Livingstone. It is called Malota area. There are so many, it's a shanty compound which has been in existence since about 1950s around, living in this area. And this is an area which is prone to a lot of child sexual abuse. A lot of children have been abused in this area. So you'd find we need to sensitize the people even on human trafficking in this area, because there is a lot of trafficking that is going on, which is silent, which we need to talk about in this area.
Advance abuser! Hey!
Mwana usiku, waenda kutu usiku makoro. Wamakoro wamankarapo, avomeleza mwana aende usiku mwana wa 15 years agona out chamufunza uja mwana nishi ba makolo wa isema makono yame tulengesa bana ukamkalipira iwe si makolo wake akuletera nkoli pa nyumba atunga kalipira bwanji mwana wangu
ati mlandani zine bakulu
ndine Alex
Alex ati bwanji ngani yano wai bakulu bagwana bana tuzeni
bamaye babo basokapo batinendogona no ukapa kumsongano befe sex yabagwira na kugona kupira mwana kao na ukakuonaye
abachikulire aba bameyafuna kugona abana babo ni mankwala bafuna kuloya abana babo kubaloza ningaende pali nganga ni pase pakoli pasa nganga oja chame nifuna chichonzi hata mwananga ningampai
ine nigrani zati bakutia magwira ati bafana bera ngoma kambati ati AIDS zasira ngauna AIDS ukagwana ngamfana ati isira
I escaped from the hotel and took a walk in the streets. I met a certain Zambian man.
Until society itself sees child labor as a particular problem, as a huge problem, like they see it with HIV and AIDS, then it will never be relevant to the media because we just reflect what the society wants. And for as long as society keeps quiet about that problem, we don't have a basis, do you understand? We don't have a basis on which to bombard them with information they don't want.
Under the notion out there, journalists like police people require the cooperation of the members of the public in order to arrest the situations. So we would like members of the public out there that are equally sensitive and aware enough of the issues of young people to, visit our newsrooms, confront journalists that you know in your neighborhood and bring these issues to the fore. If we have that kind of cooperation, everyone takes it upon themselves to bring these issues to the fore, we shall be able to tackle this issue effectively and bring justice to bear the experiences of our young people.
The freedom of expression, the freedom of information, those are birthrights. And if we find in our localities the media is not giving us that which we expect, we should not sit in our homes and just start guessing. Let us get out. Let us step out and bring our concerns to the public, to the media management, to the NGOs that are operating within our localities, so that they understand that they are there because of the people, not because of themselves. Otherwise, a river without stones is not a river, it cannot flow.